And all of us, would mean Eric Barger, my very often co-host, and my producer, Larry Kutzler, who spent a good number of years as a pastor. We're talking a little bit off air, asking how can churches and pastors and Christian leaders and Sunday school teachers, small group leaders, realize that 1/3 of the Bible is eschatology or Bible prophecy, and yet choose to either ignore it or scoff at it. And both my producer, Larry Kutzler, and I were heavily influenced, and I want him to express his own experience. But my life was turned upside down in the 1970s when I started to become aware of all the teachings out there, the solid ones, thanks to Tim LaHaye and others, on end-time events. And Larry, your experience was what?
Well, I came to faith in the late 70s, or I should say early 70s, late 1970, just about the time that the late great Planet Earth by Hal Lindsey was written. And that book just got me so excited that I could actually know something about the future and have the assurance of knowing God was behind it, that he would, make the things that Hal was talking about a reality. And it just deepened my faith and got me into the church where I was grounded in other areas of discipleship. But that was the catalyst that got me going.
All right. Now let me continue my questioning of you. So then you as a pastor, did you bring this into your pulpit?
Always I did. I've always had a heart for Israel. I always had a heart for prophecy because I knew that people need to know what's coming ahead. Now, I agree, Jan. I think Dr. Reagan and Eric, they were talking about how so many pastors are saying there's so many views out there. Well, I agree there are so many views, but I still think you wade into the prophetic and you allow the Holy Spirit to help you find what is the best that's out there rather than trying to say, well, let's just throw our hands up and not do anything.
Okay, then let me ask you a follow-up question. So you were ignited, let's just say, by the general topic of end times eschatology. Your fellow pastors, how did they feel about that in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s?
Well, I think early on, Jan, in the 70s and 80s, there was a great interest in the prophetic. But as time went on, now, I don't know if the church got more sophisticated or more educated, but as time went on in the 90s, it was not mentioned at all. In fact, the social justice became more prominent and prevalent within the church and within seminaries. In fact, when I think back at my seminary experience, again, I had a good experience. However, there was very little eschatology we ever talked about. But we talked a lot about how do we get the gospel to the poor.
Okay. Eric, you have recently completed, and we've been talking about it on air, you've recently completed a new DVD on the cult of liberalism, and you said to me off air that there were 4 or 5 things that happened when liberalism kind of took over. How does that play into our discussion?
I'll go through those, Jan. I do want to say that I think what happened was the church wanted to be accepted by the culture and the world around us, so we didn't want to talk about anything that people might roll their eyes at. That's the problem. We decided we want to believe some things in the Bible, but not everything. And if the next breed of pastor, the next generation of pastor, isn't being taught those things in Bible school, in seminary, he's not going to pass those on. The missionaries are not going to pass those on. The Christian leaders who go through Bible school and seminary, they're not going to pass those things to their congregation. So I think that's why we have this lack of teaching. And I too, as Larry, I saw a marked difference as this aspect of the scriptures of Christianity was being left out of the menu in so many churches. And of course, we do have Kingdom Now and Dominion theology that says don't touch it. And we have a lot of people in evangelicalism who have bought into that. But, if you go back and you begin to look at history, and I've done a lot of reading about the history of how liberalism took over those once sound, very evangelical mainline churches many years ago, here are the 5 things that I noted that took place. People moved their membership out of those churches that began to slide because they themselves, the folks, knew the Bible and knew they couldn't leave their families in that precarious spiritual position. The next thing is people stayed because they didn't know the Bible. They were biblically ignorant and didn't understand what the scriptures say. And of course, they're going to sit there and be taught by someone who is saying, really, that they don't believe the whole Bible because they're leaving out this huge swath of scripture that deals with prophecy. The next thing that happened was they stayed in those churches because of tradition, family, and friendships. And obviously that's the hardest one because you've got so many different personal ties that go on. And I've talked to so many people who are so in such a perturbed state with themselves. Can I stay there even though I know it's not right what's being taught, but how can I leave? And they go through this gymnastic over that. The next thing, they stayed to retain or to attain power, to either have the power they already had or to get power, to become a board member, etc., a Bible teacher, somebody that was looked up to, and people with a low self-esteem would have done that. But the thing that really bothers me of these 5 things that took place because the scriptures began to be ignored in liberalism from so far back was that so many people got up and left and never came back to any church. They abandoned Christianity because they recognized that so much was being left out or so much was being changed about the teaching of the church that they knew they couldn't trust it. Think how many people have decided just to walk away totally because of what was being taught or not being taught from the pulpit. And that's the bottom line to the concern that I have about any of these issues about what's being taught or left out of the scriptures from the pulpit in our churches.
So, Larry Kutzler, and you talk to pastors on a regular basis, and what do you say to them today about this topic? How do you encourage them, or have you given up?
Oh, I haven't given up, Jan. I don't at all. I think I try to come at it from the standpoint of saying that the scripture is very clear of what's going to happen in the future, and I'm excited about it, and I don't have to sort of wake up someday and be surprised that I can go to bed at night and know that not only God is in control, but I know where he's going because the scripture tells me that. And I want to know, and I want to serve a God that gives me that assurance. I mean, when you look at the scriptures, and Eric, I was going to ask you, when you read the prophetic scriptures, let's just take, for example, Matthew 24. What are some of the things that jump out at you? And Jesus basically said, watch so that no one deceives you. Well, prophecy helps us to be prepared so that the deception doesn't come and rule our lives. So what do you see when you look at scripture like that, Eric?
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. Prophecy does help prepare us, and it helps also for us to understand that God is in complete and total control, that nothing is taking him by surprise. And, Jesus was speaking to the disciples when he said that too, the people who had watched him raise the dead and feed the 5,000, and he's telling them, be careful you're not deceived. Paul says the same thing to the Thessalonians, be careful you're not deceived. So we have these warnings, and I think it's important that we understand the day we live in and that we don't cherry pick from the headlines and try to make them somehow fit scripture.
Right.
But how can we ignore these things? That's the key. How can we ignore it? It's not chic in our larger churches today or with the theologies, the plans that are being taught in the church growth movement to talk about Bible prophecy. What we've decided instead is to educate our people about how to live a nice, successful earthly life in the few decades that we might have here on the earth, instead of preparing them for eternity. We need the eternal perspective that Dr. Reagan talked about.